I am the one who shines through you when you leave me room.
Libra, contentment, leading to self-composure. Hi everyone, and welcome again to this month's virtue practice. We've chosen to put this particular saint, Saint Brigid, at Libra, primarily because we have such different points of view. We have very different sides of the scale in which we ourselves connect with this saint. I would place Saint Brigid in a way which is incredibly different from the way Andrews places Saint Brigid, and we want to express this because that's actually a reality. We all have our connection to the saints through different doorways. I've learnt to grow in my relationship to Saint Brigid living in Ireland and experiencing the people's connection to her. She's seen in some ways as a protector. On St. Brigid's Day, not everybody of course, but it's tradition to weave a St. Brigid's cross, and out of the reeds that grow in the wetlands, and that cross is put as a protection, a spiritual protection for those that live inside that home, and you burn the cross from the previous year. And it's not an uncommon thing. In fact, I find myself having to weave them for many of the local farmers as a part of this ritual that happens. So St. Brigid, for me, has been a very important saint because she connects with this spiritual protection. She also developed the first Irish nunnery, and again in those nunneries there was a sense of spiritual protection, and she's known in a way to protect women, children, and to hold this quality of giving to the community. Now, she has a mythological past in the sense that she was given the name of the goddess Brigid. She was brought up in a druid home and given this goddess name. But she also heard St. Patrick speak as a child, and that was what would transform her going forward into life. I followed the places of St. Brigid, the wells dedicated to her, the places of which she has given her work, and that legend goes far and wide. Even to Iona, there's a well of eternal youth at the top of one of the hills there, which is again given to this that St. Brigid manifested there or came there, even though there's no actual evidence of that in the so-called history. And because of that lack of history, there has also been a question of her place in the church. But nevertheless, she has now really taken her place as a saint in Ireland, and even now has her finally her public holiday. So alongside St. Patrick, there's now St. Brigid's Day, which is celebrated. So she has this extraordinary, perhaps, legacy of working with the women, working with nuns, bringing the female stream into the Irish culture. But that was always there in Celtic Christianity, or in the pre-Christian times. The power of the female goddess was deeply known and revered in Ireland. and yet, of course, it got outed through the Christian path that became much more patriarchal. But St. Brigid was one of those saints that held that consciousness because she carried a stream out of this ancient relationship. And even her day of celebration on the 1st of February, the so-called first day of spring, is connected to these ancient celebrations and ancient festivals. So for me, St. Brigid is a really powerful female saint that holds something of an ancient stream, an ancient feminine wisdom. And for you, a very different saint.
Well, I really discovered Brigid, who some people believe, in fact, the Saint's Day of 1st of February being also the first day of spring was a sort of Christianized version of that celebration, which was in fact the Celtic goddess Brigid as well. But nevertheless, down the history and the corridors of time, stories remain of her work and miracles, in fact, one of which particularly interested me, and that was turning water into beer. As I travelled Ireland, what I found interesting is, because St. Patrick did no such thing, and, you know, we all know what St. Patrick's Day is like, and, well, for a lot of people, for the majority of people who celebrate St. Patrick's Day, beer has a lot to do with it. So I find that fascinating that, you know, it's, you know, St. Brigid's, you know, is a lesser known in that respect. But the stories go that St. Brigid was working with lepers on a daily basis, and one day was horrified to discover that they'd run out of beer. Now, it must be said that beer then and beer now are probably two different things, because back in those days, a lot of the water spots where they could drink from around their villages and towns were polluted. So what they did was they used to drink beer instead of water to hydrate themselves. So she got a barrel of water and turned it into beer. It's also said that she supplied up to 13 churches with beer from the Thursday right to the end of the Easter celebration, from one barrel of beer. So she's very connected to beer, and obviously I've been known to enjoy a pint or two down the time after a gig. But okay, perhaps a superficial attraction to this saint, but one that I could not ignore.
That's funny. Well, so is really that it? That's your relationship to this saint?
Pretty much, if I'm to be absolutely brutally honest.
Well, I guess we can't always connect to the deeper pictures, although one would say this turning water into beer, or the abundance of it, is a very deep spiritual esoteric picture, but it's not necessarily the way you're receiving it.
Well, no, perhaps not. Listen, the whole thing is what you get from travelling around Ireland and being a musician travelling around Ireland is I think what it gives me as well is a picture of the saints. They, you know, now you see, say, if you've been watching the TV in the Vatican, all these people in their robes and looking holier than thou. Saints were very earthy, real people. They weren't, you know, they weren't walking around thinking they were better than others. They were way down in the crap of life, sifting through and working with the lowest of the low. And, you know, that's the real spirituality, and that's what you get from these people. So I can well imagine, after a hard day working with the lepers, you know, it's definitely not beyond the bounds of belief that Saint Brigid might be having a couple of pints.
for her own contentment.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, what is interesting about Saint Brigid, I think, is probably a very real thing to say, is that she was not a saint that bought her way in. Now, we've learned through this exploration of saints that there are saints that really lived the virtues and entered into this transformative process in relationship to others. And then there were saints that were bought their sainthood. There was a time, particularly in Europe, where if you had enough money, you kind of bought one of your children a sainthood. That was a real question for us around St. Ebba, who, you know, you're connected to as a saint in a very different way than Brigid. But nevertheless, St. Ebba may have been bought her sainthood because she came from a family where that was typical in those times. But one of the things that we know about St. Brigid and St. Patrick is they emanate this, I guess we might use the word truth of sainthood, where it is their life. It's not a look, as you're describing. It's not, they don't want to look saintly, they want to live saintly. And that's something which, you know, we find on the path of spirituality today, when there is so much available to us that we can all read and speak spiritual words. And there are many people today that want to look spiritual rather than really live it to the core of their being. It's like a fashion or a garment that's placed upon them, and that still exists. It seems to exist both in sort of religion and in the New Age movement. And part of my journey with the saints was to find those that were so committed that their life is a signature of their relationship to the spiritual world, and everything that they do is a connection to that. So in that sense, I am able to agree with you. Even the beer the beer offer in Brigid, if that in fact happened, but would have come from that rightful place, because her whole life was about that. So it's not what you do, but where you do it from. And she is an expression of that in a way that, you know, on one hand of the scales, I would connect with this spiritual protection that really comes from this feminine place. And on the other hand, what would you call your side of the scales?
Well, I'm not quite sure what I'd call it, but what I'm very impressed about, apart from all her work, and the fact that she was a woman in that early period that was able to make her mark. Also the fact that she really was known as the patron saint of beer. And I'd just like to finish with, in fact, a poem that she wrote herself, because she was also known for poetry. And here it is. Saint Brigid. I'd like to give a lake of beer to God. I'd love the heavenly host to be tippling here for all eternity. I'd love the men of heaven to live with me, to dance and sing. If they wanted, I'd put at their disposal vats of suffering. White cups of love I'd give them with a heart and a half. Sweet pitchers of mercy I'd offer to every man. I'd make heaven a cheerful spot because the happy heart is true. I'd make the men contented for their own sake. I'd like Jesus to love me too. I'd like the people of heaven to gather from all the parishes around. I'd give a special welcome to the woman, the three Marys of great renown. I'd sit with the men, the women and God there by the lake of beer. We'd be drinking good health forever, and every drop would be a prayer.
Wow, that says it. And in that, we'll go straight now to listen to one of the songs you wrote whilst in Ireland, whilst connecting to the saints, and utilise this opportunity, regardless of what your relationship to the saints are, that you can enter into this feeling experience and to see if you can develop a connection to the virtues of any of the saints that you've come across and allow that virtue to emanate from you. Then we let the music that we've put with Saint Brigid, Celtic Gypsy, to dissolve and just allow us to be echoing the feeling experience that those different instruments unfolded. And then we build again the virtue that we're working with. Try to build it to the fullest that we can, so that we don't just sense it a little bit, but we try to build that quality resounding in our own being. And then we allow it to stream into our hands, into our feet, and up into our head. And then we return back to the center of our heart.